The war had ended, but the scars were still fresh. Robb Stark was dead, the North had no king, and Winterfell was nothing but burned stones and broken memories. The Lannisters had won. Or at least, that's what they thought. Tywin Lannister, sharp as ever, didn't care much for fire or swords anymore. He believed power came from paper, marriage, and strategy. Sitting in his chair in the dark halls of the Red Keep, he looked over a raven's letter from the Night's Watch. A simple line caught his eye. Lord Commander Mormont is dead. Jon Snow may be elected. He leaned back slowly and whispered, Jon Snow. A bastard, yes, but a Stark still. Most men saw Jon as nothing, as Snow, born of shame, sworn to the Watch. But Tywin, ever the master of plans, saw something else. He called for Grand Maester Pycelle and said, Send word to Castle Black. Offer Jon Snow the name Stark. And a title. Pycelle blinked. But my lord, the boy's taken the black. He can't marry, bear children, or rule. Tywin cut him off coldly. Everything changes in war. Even vows. A raven flew north with a sealed letter. Jon Snow was tired. Tired of the cold, the blood, and the constant death around him. Ever since Craster's Keep, nothing felt right. His brothers were dying, the wildlings were marching, and Ghost hadn't returned in days. Then the raven came. He read the letter by torchlight, the snow falling outside like ash from a burned world. It carried the seal of the hand of the king. The letter was cold, just like the man who wrote it. But the words shook Jon's world. If you bend the knee and swear loyalty to the crown, we offer you the name Jon Stark, Warden of the North. Winterfell shall be rebuilt under your rule. Jon stared at the parchment, his heart racing. Stark. He had dreamed of that name as a boy, longing to be seen as one of them. Not the bastard in the shadows, not the unwanted Snow, but this. This felt like betrayal. He was sworn to the Watch. He had taken vows. Still, the thought pulled at him. Could he bring peace to the North? Could he protect what remained of his family? Could he save Winterfell from being just a memory? Sam found him later, sitting alone in the icy hall. What's wrong? Sam asked. Jon handed him the letter without a word. Sam read it twice. Do you think it's real? It's from Tywin Lannister. If it's real, it's a trap. If it's not, it's still a trap. But what if it's not? Sam said softly, what if it's a chance? Jon didn't sleep that night. Far to the south, Tywin sipped his wine and studied a map of the North. They're proud people, he told Kevin. They won't bow to a Lannister, but they might follow a Stark. Kevin raised a brow. But Jon Snow? He has Stark blood. That's enough for fools. Tywin smirked. What if he refuses? Then we kill him, quietly, and say the wildlings did it. Kevin said nothing. Tywin placed a small lion sigil on Winterfell's burned mark on the map. Jon Snow will either kneel or die. Either way, the North will be ours. The next morning, Jon stood at the top of the wall, his black cloak whipping in the wind. He looked out across the snow-covered land and thought of Ned Stark. He thought of Robb. He thought of Winterfell burning. He thought of what it meant to carry the name Stark. Was it betrayal? Or was it destiny? As the cold wind howled across the wall, Jon closed his eyes. The war might be over in the south, but for the North, it was just beginning. Jon didn't answer Tywin's letter right away. Days passed. He trained with the brothers, patrolled the wall, and listened to Maester Aemon talk about old kings and forgotten wars. But that letter stayed with him, folded in his cloak like a secret burning against his chest. Every time he thought of it, he saw Winterfell, not as ashes, but alive again. He pictured the gates opening, the banners flying, and the snow falling on stone towers that still stood. He imagined Arya's laughter echoing through the halls, and Bran climbing walls he was told not to. Then he'd wake and remember. Arya was missing, Bran was gone beyond the wall, and Winterfell was still a ruin. Finally, he told Aemon about the letter. The old man didn't flinch. "The Lannisters are clever men," he said softly. "But clever men often forget honor." Jon nodded. "They want to use me?" "Yes," Aemon said. "But maybe you can use them too." That night, Jon wrote a reply. He didn't promise anything, just asked questions. If the king truly wanted the North to have peace, Jon wanted terms. Real ones. No lies. No traps. A raven took his letter south, but someone else had already heard about it. Roose Bolton, Warden of the North in name only, backed by Tywin's word and nothing more. He ruled from Dreadfort now, his banners flying proudly, but he knew the North hated him. They whispered behind his back, spat at his soldiers, and still called him traitor for what he did at the Red Wedding Dot when word reached him that Jon Snow had been offered Winterfell. He didn't react right away, just stared into the fire, quiet and still. Ramsay stood nearby, grinning like a wolf with blood in its teeth. "Let me handle him, father. I'll cut him down before he ever puts on a Stark cloak." Roose turned his head slowly. "No, if Tywin wants Jon, we don't kill him. Not yet. But if we kill him now, we fight the crown. If he takes Winterfell, we take it back. The North won't follow a bastard raised by crows." Ramsay frowned. "Then what do we do?" Roose stood, walking to the window where the wind blew sharp and cold. "We wait, and we watch. If Jon Snow is fool enough to play their game, we make sure he loses." Back at Castle Black, Jon received a second letter. It wasn't from Tywin. It was from someone else. A-N-S-A. He stared at the writing, his heart pounding. Her words were short, but every one of them struck deep. "I am alive. I am in the Vale. Littlefinger says he wants to help the North. Don't trust the Lannisters. Trust yourself." Jon clenched the letter in his fist. He hadn't known Sansa was alive. And if she was in the Vale, what was Littlefinger planning? The game was changing faster than Jon could catch up. And then came the final push. Tywin sent a knight to Castle Black, a Lannister bannerman. Not a soldier, but a mouthpiece. He rode up to the gates of Castle Black with gold armor and red silk, clearly not built for the snow. Jon met him in the courtyard. The knight bowed. "Lord Jon Snow. Or shall I say, Lord Stark?" "I haven't accepted anything," Jon replied flatly. The knight smiled. "Yet, Lord Tywin asks for your presence in King's Landing, to speak in person. The crown is prepared to legitimize your name, rebuild Winterfell, and give you full control of the North. You'll rule as warden, with the full support of the Iron Throne. And what does the crown want in return? Loyalty, peace, order." Jon looked at the black gate behind him. His brothers were watching from the walls, silent. The men he swore his life to. The oath he took echoed in his mind. "Night gathers, and now my watch begins." But something else echoed too, his father's voice. "You have Stark blood. Never forget who you are." That night, Jon stood with Sam again. "If I go, I may never return." Sam nodded. "You're not the boy I met at the wall anymore. Maybe. Maybe you're meant for more." Jon didn't sleep. He packed only a few things, wrote letters to Sam and Maester Aemon, and before the sun rose, he left. He rode south, not as Jon Snow of the Night's Watch, but as Jon Stark, walking into the lion's den. King's Landing smelled like rot and gold. Even the wind felt dirty here. As Jon passed through the gates, he couldn't help but notice how many eyes were on him. Guards, merchants, whores, even the rats. It was like the city knew he didn't belong. They didn't see a bastard from the wall anymore. They saw a threat. The knight who rode with him said little, but once they reached the Red Keep, Jon was taken straight to the Tower of the Hand. The halls were quiet. Servants vanished as he passed, and the air felt thick like something dangerous was waiting just ahead. When the doors opened, there he was, Tywin Lannister, sitting behind his polished desk, ink on his fingers. Papers all around like a spider weaving a web of words and gold. He looked up slowly, cold and unreadable. "Lord Snow." "Just Jon," Jon replied. Tywin gave the slightest smile. "We'll see about that." They didn't waste time. Tywin laid out his offer with the sharpness of a blade. "You'll be named Jon Stark, Warden of the North. Winterfell will be rebuilt. You'll sit as lord of your house. All I ask is your oath, loyalty to the crown, no rebellion, no foolish talk of northern independence." Jon listened, calm but stiff. "And what happens if I say no?" "Then the Boltons will remain. The North will rot. The people will suffer. And the next time a Stark rises, we'll burn them too. You killed my brother." Tywin didn't blink. "Robb Stark made war. He lost. That is all." The words made Jon's stomach turn, but he held his ground. "And what about Sansa?" "She's safe for now. If you take Winterfell, she'll be returned. She can rule beside you." Jon narrowed his eyes. "Why do you even care? You're a Lannister. You've never cared for the North." Tywin leaned forward, voice cold and slow. "Because I don't like chaos. I like control. The North must bend. Or break. And you, Jon Snow, are the perfect leash." That was it. No lies, no sweet words. Tywin wasn't trying to pretend this was about honor or unity. He was offering Jon a crown, with chains hidden underneath. Later, Jon was shown to a chamber, not a prison, but not freedom either. He sat by the fire for hours, thinking. He thought about Ned. What would his father have done? But the truth was, Ned was gone. Robb was gone. Winterfell was gone. If Jon wanted to save what was left, he had to play the game now. And that game was played in shadows and whispers, not with swords and vows. He took the paper offered to him and wrote one sentence. "I accept the crown's offer." I accept the crown's offer. The next morning, Tywin held court. The lords of Westeros gathered, Tyrells, Freys, a few nervous Northerners. The Iron Throne stood cold and high, and behind it sat young King Tommen, barely more than a boy, staring blankly at the crowd. But it was Tywin who spoke. "Let it be known," his voice echoed, "by royal decree, Jon Snow is hereby legitimized as Jon Stark. He is Warden of the North, Lord of Winterfell, and a loyal bannerman to the crown." Some clapped, some didn't. The Freys looked sour. The Tyrells just watched. Jon stepped forward, dressed in stark black and gray. No gold, no lions, no pride. Just the look of a man who didn't want the throne, but took it anyway. He knelt before Tommen. "I swear loyalty to the crown," he said, his voice steady. "And I will bring peace to the North." Tywin watched him like a hawk. The game had started. That night, Cersei Lannister sat in her chamber, furious. "You gave a Stark a castle," she hissed at Tywin. "What happens when he turns on us?" Tywin sipped his wine. "He won't, because he knows the cost. And if he does?" Tywin's face turned to stone. "Then we kill him. But until then, we use him. The North follows Stark names, not Bolton blood." Cersei poured another drink. "You always said never trust a wolf." Tywin looked into the fire. "I don't. That's why I keep them on a leash." And far in the north, Roose Bolton read the news with a blank stare. "Jon Snow," he said softly. "Lord Stark now." Ramsay grinned. "Can I flay him?" "Not yet," Roose replied. "But prepare the men. Winterfell will burn again, if it must. Jon rode back north with heavy silence all around him. The southern wind followed him like a shadow, even as snow returned to the skies. Behind him were titles, power, and oaths made under a lion's gaze. Ahead of him was the north, wounded, suspicious, angry. As he passed through towns and quiet villages, he could feel the eyes on him. Some watched with hope, others with hate. Not all Northerners liked the idea of a Stark returning under Lannister orders. At Winter Town, the people came out of their homes. They looked tired and thin, their faces pale from hunger and grief. A few stepped forward to ask if the rumors were true. "Are you the new Lord Stark?" one old man asked. Jon nodded. "I am." "And you bent the knee to the south?" "I bent the knee to save the north," Jon replied quietly. The man stared at him. "Then save it." Winterfell was still a ruin. Blackened stones, broken towers, and ash buried under new snow. But the Stark banners flew again, this time with more weight than pride, a reminder of what was lost and what must never be lost again. Jon entered through the gates and stood in the great hall. Cold wind blew through shattered windows. Memories floated in the air like ghosts. Robb's laughter, Arya's footsteps, Ned's voice. He turned to the builders. "Start with the hall. The people need to see fire in this place again." He sent letters across the north, to House Manderly, House Glover, House Reed. He asked for men, supplies, and loyalty. Some replied with warmth. Some did not reply at all. The north remembered betrayal, and Jon Snow, or Jon Stark now, still smelled of Lannister gold. Meanwhile, in Dreadfort, Ramsay paced like a dog ready to bite. "Why haven't we marched yet?" He snarled. Roose, as calm as always, stood by a window. "Because Jon will fall on his own." "You really believe that?" Roose turned, cold eyes piercing. "Yes, the North won't follow a bastard tied to Tywin. We just have to wait for him to make a mistake." Ramsay licked his lips. "Can I send him a message?" "Just something small. Maybe a finger or two." Roose didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ramsay was already gone. The first attack came at night. A small farm near the last river, burned to the ground. 3 dead, a boy taken. The Bolton sigil carved into the barn wall. Jon rode there the next morning, eyes dark with anger. He stood among the ashes, fists clenched. "Tell the people," he said, voice low. "This won't be forgotten." But inside, Jon knew this was the beginning. Ramsay Bolton wasn't just testing him. He was calling him out, and Jon had to answer. Maester Luwin was long gone, but a young new Maester had taken his place. Maester Thorne, a man from the Reach, loyal to the Citadel, but not blind to politics. He gave Jon the letter that came by Raven. Jon opened it. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was wild, scratched like it was written in blood. "Bastards don't rule. They bleed." Inside the envelope was a finger, small, frozen. Jon stared at it for a long time and threw it into the fire. That night, Jon sat alone in the repaired corner of the hall. The fire cracked behind him, and Ghost lay at his side, eyes glowing like moonlight. Sansa's words echoed again in his mind. "Don't trust the Lannisters. Trust yourself." He had taken the crown's gift. He had used Tywin's name to return. But now, he had to survive without their leash. Jon stood, walked to the table, and rolled out the map of the North. He pointed to Dreadfort. "We end this, but not with blood right away." He wrote a letter. "To Roose Bolton, Warden no longer. You are called to Winterfell to answer for the crimes of your house. Refuse, and you will be hunted like the wolves you betrayed." He signed it. Lord Jon Stark. He sent it with 2 ravens, one to Dreadfort and one south, to King's Landing. Because if war was coming, Jon needed to know something very important. Would Tywin Lannister protect him? Or had he just handed Jon to the wolves? The cold was sharper now. Even Ghost stayed close to the fire. Snow covered the roofs of Winterfell like a white shroud, and every gust of wind felt like a whisper of war. Jon waited. The ravens had flown. Now all he could do was see who answered. Days passed. No reply from Dreadfort. But a raven came from the south. Jon opened the scroll, half expecting threats, half expecting silence. It was short, written in Tywin's perfect, sharp hand. The Boltons were never loyal. If they raise arms, they do so alone. You have my support. Keep the North in order. Jon read it twice. He didn't smile. He didn't feel relief. Just more weight on his shoulders. He wasn't sure what was worse, having Tywin's leash or being free of it. Later that evening, Jon sat with Maester Thorne and Sir Roderick's niece, Lyanna Mormont, who had returned with her uncle to see Winterfell for herself. She was young, but sharper than most grown men. "You sent him a letter?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's all?" Jon nodded. "If Roose thinks he can ignore me, I want him to do it in writing. And if he marshes instead? Then I meet him before he reaches our gates." Lyanna leaned back. "I hope you kill them all." At Dreadfort, Roose Bolton read Jon's letter without a word. Ramsay, of course, was laughing already. "He threatens us? The bastard boy who kissed Tywin's boots?" "He has the crown's backing now," Roose said quietly. "And the North is watching." Ramsay leaned on the table, his grin wider than his face. "Let them watch. When we send his head back in a box, they'll remember who holds real power." Roose looked at his son. "Make no mistake, Ramsay. If we lose, we're finished." "Then we don't lose," Ramsay whispered. And by morning, the Bolton banners were on the move. Jon got the news from a raven 2 days later. 300 men, Maester Thorne read aloud. Marching fast, Ramsay leads them. Jon stood silent for a moment. Then he turned to Sir Davos, who had arrived at Winterfell just a day ago, sent by Stannis before his death to offer peace between remaining northern houses. Davos had no more king, but he stayed for Jon. "You've fought against worse odds," Jon said. "I've also run from worse ones," Davos replied honestly. "But this time, I'll stand beside you." Jon called the banners. The Manderleys answered. So did the reeds. The Umbers sent no reply, which meant they might still be on Bolton Gold. They had barely 500 men by the third night. Jon stood in the courtyard with his sword in hand. Ghost paced beside him like a restless shadow. He knew they were outnumbered, but he also knew the Boltons were hated. "Ramsay doesn't want a war," Jon told his captains. "He wants a show. Let's give him one he won't forget." They met on open snow, 2 miles from the old woods. The battlefield was quiet, just the creak of banners and the slow breath of horses. Jon rode out first, wearing stark gray, his sword lone-claw at his side. Ramsay followed, wearing a smirk as wide as the sky. "You've got your name," Ramsay said, circling him. "Nice cloak, but still a bastard in the bones, aren't you?" Jon didn't answer. "You think wearing that wolf on your chest makes you one of them?" Ramsay kept going, mocking. "You think the North will follow you? They'll follow whoever scares them more." Jon stared, cold and silent. "You know what I did to that farm boy?" Ramsay grinned. "I took him apart like a rabbit. Want to guess which part I sent you?" Still nothing. Ramsay leaned closer. "You're not your father. Ned Stark was a fool. You're just a sad little crow in a wolf's skin." Jon's voice came out flat and steady. "You talk too much." And he turned his horse around, ending the meeting. The battle began the next morning. No speeches, no songs, just screaming. Ramsay charged like a man who believed in blood more than strategy. But Jon had planned for that. He pulled back his line at the right time, split his men through the trees, and trapped Ramsay's men between ice and steel. It wasn't easy. Jon bled. Men died. The snow turned red, and the air smelled of iron and fear. But by nightfall, Ramsay was on his knees. Jon walked toward him, sword drawn, his face pale but calm. "You think killing me will end this?" Ramsay spat. "There will be more. Always more." Jon didn't raise his sword yet. He looked him dead in the eyes. "You're not worth a blade." He turned around. But Ghost didn't. The direwolf moved like wind. Ramsay never screamed. Winterfell was quiet again. Jon stood at the top of the gate tower, looking out across the snow. The banners of House Bolton had been burned, and for the first time in a long while, Winterfell belonged to the Starks again. The North was his now, but it didn't feel like victory. Winterfell stood tall again, but it was quiet. Too quiet. No laughter in the halls. No children chasing through the snow. No smell of fresh bread from the kitchens. Just echoes. Jon walked through the courtyard one evening, watching the builders repair what the fire had taken years ago. Stone by stone, they were rebuilding the home he once lost. But he knew, fixing walls was the easy part. Fixing people was harder. Some northern lords had bent the knee quickly after Ramsay's fall. The Manderleys pledged full support. The Reeds sent word from the Neck that they stood with House Stark. Even the Karstarks, once loyal to the Boltons, sent a raven saying they rather follow a Stark than a corpse. But Jon still felt it. Distrust. He had taken the North back, with a Lannister name behind him, and Northerners didn't forget things like that. One morning, he received another raven. It wasn't from the south. It was from the Vale. Sansa was coming. He read the message twice, staring at her careful handwriting. Littlefinger says the Vale is ready to support the North, but he has his own ideas. "I'm coming home, Jon. We need to talk." That one sentence made Jon more nervous than 100 Bolton soldiers. Sansa had grown sharper. She knew how the game was played now. And Littlefinger? He didn't move without a reason. Jon knew the man had helped save her. But he also knew Petyr Baelish wasn't the type to help anyone without expecting something in return. Still, he had no choice. He ordered the gates opened for her arrival. When Sansa rode into Winterfell, Jon felt something shift in the cold air. She wore a deep blue cloak, her face calm, her eyes unreadable. She looked like a queen, not a girl running from monsters anymore. Jon met her in the courtyard. She didn't say anything at first, just hugged him tightly. "You're really here," she whispered. "So are you," Jon replied, unsure what else to say. They sat in the rebuilt great hall, a quiet fire crackling between them. Sansa sipped warm wine and finally said, "You've done more than I ever imagined." Jon shook his head. "I did what I had to. I had help." "You bent the knee to Tywin Lannister," she said carefully. "I did," Jon replied, "because we had no army. Because the North was burning. Because no one else was coming." She looked at him for a long time. "I'm not angry, just cautious." "So am I." Then her tone changed. "Littlefinger wants to join us. Officially. He says the Vale should protect Winterfell." "And what does he want in return?" Jon asked, already knowing the answer. "He says nothing now, but he's looking at me like I'm his prize." Jon's jaw clenched. "He'll never touch you. Not while I breathe." Sansa smiled slightly. "That's sweet. But Jon, he doesn't fight with swords. He fights with whispers. And he's already telling people that he helped win the North, not you." Jon leaned back. "Let him whisper. I won't play his game. You might not have a choice." That night, Jon called a council. The great northern houses had gathered again in the hall, this time with hot food on the tables and a roaring fire behind them. Lord Wyman Manderley spoke first. "You've done well, Lord Stark. You brought us victory. But now we must ask, are we truly free? Or do we answer to the Lannisters still?" Others murmured. Heads nodded. Jon stood. I took Tywin's help to save this land, not to serve him. And I've already received word. The crown won't interfere unless we rebel. So we are dogs with longer leashes, someone said bitterly. No, Jon said firmly. We are wolves. And the pack survives. Sansa stepped forward, standing beside Jon. Her voice was strong. My brother gave you back your home. He bled for it. And I will stand beside him, not as a pawn of the Vale or the South, but as a Stark of Winterfell. Silence filled the hall, and one by one they rose. House Mormont, House Manderly, House Reed, even the quiet Karstarks stood. Jon looked around and felt it. For the first time since he was a boy, he wasn't just a Snow. He was their lord. But not everyone in the shadows celebrated. In the crypts beneath Winterfell, Littlefinger walked alone, stopping in front of Lyanna Stark's statue. His hands were behind his back, his face thoughtful. A dead girl gave birth to a secret, and now that secret wears a crown. He smirked. You think he's just a bastard, but I think he's more than that. And if I'm right, he stepped back into the dark. Then I know where the real power lies. The North was united on the surface. The banners flew, the fires burned, and for the first time in years, Winterfell looked like a home again. But Jon knew better. Peace in Westeros was like snow in spring. It never lasted. He spent his days training new soldiers, rebuilding the watchtowers, and holding long, bitter talks with lords who still measured him with old eyes. But something was wrong. He could feel it in the air. Whispers, rumors, secrets. People were talking again. Not about Ramsay, not about Tywin, but about him. And one name kept slipping through the cracks like a shadow. Rhaegar. It began with one letter. Samwell Tarly sent it by Raven from Oldtown. Jon opened it in private, sitting near the heart tree in the Godswood, where snowflakes melted on his cloak. Jon, I found something in the Citadel. A record from the time of Robert's rebellion. It says Rhaegar Targaryen annulled his marriage to Elia Martell. He married someone else, in secret. Lyanna Stark. Jon read the lines again. If what I found is true, you weren't born a bastard. You're not a Snow. You're not even Jon Stark. You're Aegon Targaryen, true-born son of Rhaegar and the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The wind cut through the trees like a blade. Jon dropped the letter. He didn't believe it at first. He couldn't. But deep down something clicked, the way Ned had never spoken of his mother. The shame in his voice, the way he guarded the secret with his life. It wasn't shame. It was protection. Ned Stark hadn't lied to him. He had protected him from Robert Baratheon, from the world, from himself. And now Jon knew the truth. He was never a Snow, and now he wished he still was. Sansa found him in the crypts, standing before Ned's statue silent. You're shaking, she said. Jon didn't turn around. I'm not who I thought I was. I know, she replied quietly. He turned, startled. You know? Bran told me. He saw it in his visions. You're Rhaegar's son. Jon stepped back. Why didn't you tell me? Sansa looked him in the eye. Because I was afraid you'd run. He was quiet for a moment. I want none of it. Not the throne, not the name. But others will want it for you, she said. And some will want you dead because of it. He clenched his fists. Let them try. Sansa reached out and touched his arm gently. We survived because we had each other, Jon. Don't forget that now. Even if your name changes, we're still Starks. You are still my brother. That broke something in him. He nodded. But the fire in his chest would not die. Word spread fast. And it didn't come from the Citadel. It came from Littlefinger. He whispered to the Vale lords, told tales of a hidden dragon born in the snow. Syed Jonzi's claim to the north was false, because he wasn't a Stark at all. He slipped letters to lords who had once fought for the Targaryens, promised rewards, offered secrets, fanned the flames of old loyalties. By the time Jon learned what was happening, it was too late to stop it. The North was beginning to question him. Again, only this time, it wasn't because of the Lannisters. It was because he might be a dragon. Maester Thorne showed Jon a letter found outside the gates, unsigned, written in sloppy ink. Targaryens burn the North. They don't save it. Jon burned it without a word, but more letters came. Whispers in the kitchens. Nervous looks from guards. Even the ravens flew slower now. He called a council. They filled the great hall. Manderly, Ormont, Reed, Glover. Jon stood at the head table, alone. "I've learned something," he said calmly. "Something I didn't ask for. My birth name is not Jon Snow. I am Aegon Targaryen." Murmurs exploded through the hall. Sansa sat beside him, tense. "But I was raised a Stark. I bled for this house. I bled for you. And I will die defending Winterfell, whether you call me Snow, Stark, or Targaryen." He let that hang in the air. Lord Manderly stood slowly. "A name doesn't matter to us. Loyalty does." Lyanna Mormont followed. "You're still our lord. A true Northman, no matter what blood runs in you." But not everyone agreed. House Glover left the hall without a word. And that night, someone tried to poison Jon's food. He didn't eat it. Ghost smelled it first, growling low, his nose buried in the meat. Jon sat quietly at the table, staring at the untouched tray. Sansa entered, saw the look in his eyes. "They're turning against me," he said. "No," she whispered. "They're afraid. Fear can be guided, or it can burn everything down." Sansa took his hand. "You have to be stronger than all of them. Prove you are not like the Targaryens they remember." "How?" he asked. "By doing what they never could," she said. "By ruling with mercy, and fighting without becoming a monster." Jon looked at her, and he knew what he had to do. But somewhere deep in the night, beneath Winterfell's stones, Littlefinger was smiling. He called a feast. When the night came, the hall was full. Fires blazed high. People drank, laughed, even smiled for the first time in months. And when they were full and warm and quiet again, Jon stood. He raised a cup. "I was raised as a Stark. I wore the black of the Watch. I bled for this land. I bled for you." He paused. "And if I die tomorrow, I die as your brother. Not as a Targaryen, not as a Lannister puppet, not as a king." He looked to the people. "To Jon Snow," someone shouted. Another followed. "To Jon Stark." And another. "To the Wolf of Winterfell." The hall roared, but not everyone was smiling. Littlefinger sat near the corner, his eyes narrow. His fingers traced the edge of his cup without drinking. He had failed. The people still followed Jon, so he moved to his last plan. Sansa found Jon in the crypts again the next morning. He was staring at Lyanna Stark's statue, but now, not with confusion, with understanding. "She died for you," Sansa said softly. "She did more than that," Jon replied. "She gave me a name, and I think I finally understand what to do with it." That's when the guards entered, breathless. "My lord, we caught him." "With a blade." "In your chambers?" Jon and Sansa exchanged a look. They dragged Littlefinger into the great hall, his cloak ripped, his smugness finally gone. Blood from a cut on his cheek had dried, making him look pitiful, not powerful. Jon stood before him, no armor, no sword. "You tried to poison me. You tried to divide the North. You spread lies about my name. And now you tried to stab me in the back." Pettier smiled weakly. "All for the good of the realm." Jon stepped closer. "The realm doesn't need snakes." He turned to the room. "This is the last time anyone uses fear to rule the North." He didn't draw his sword. He gave the nod to Arya. She was silent, cold, and fast. Littlefinger fell without another word. And the North was quiet again. Weeks passed. But as two Starks who had finally taken back their home, and in the distance the wolves howled, not in sorrow, but in strength. Winter had come. But so had the North's true lord.